I'm 26, and I think one of the hardest things to explain to people is how something can look caring from the outside while feeling suffocating when you are the one standing in the middle of it. No one was screaming. No one was threatening me outright. No one was saying anything dramatic enough that you could point to one sentence and say, "There, that's the problem." It was subtler than that. It was the slow realization that some people do not actually want closeness with you. They want access. They want compliance. They want the right to keep showing up in your life, asking questions, making plans, and positioning themselves at the center of every emotional event while calling it love. And once I saw that clearly, I could not unsee it. My older sister is 30, I'm 26, and our family is small enough that every conflict echoes. Our mother died 9 years ago. After that, her brother and his wife started appearing more often. At first, it felt comforting. They invited us to lunch, brought over groceries sometimes, checked in around birthdays and anniversaries, and acted like they wanted to make sure we were still wrapped in something that looked like family. For a while, I appreciated it. Grief makes you less careful about who you let in. If someone shows up with food, concern, and a fixed tone of certainty, it is easy to mistake that for safety. My uncle's name is Victor. His wife is Renee. Victor is 51, Renee is 49, and together they have perfected the art of making pressure sound like concern. They are the kind of couple who always speak in phrases like, "We're just trying to stay connected. We care too much to let distance happen. We don't want the family drifting." None of that sounds bad on paper. The problem is that in practice, all of it came with hooks. They wanted information, who we had seen, what our father had said, whether he was dating anyone, whether he had mentioned them, whether we were okay with how cold things had gotten between them. Questions wrapped in sympathy, but questions all the same. At first, I answered more than I should have because I still thought honesty would keep things simple. It did not. It just taught them that access was available if they asked with the right tone. Things got uglier when they fell out with my father. I am not going to write a full family history because honestly, I would need a whiteboard and a legal pad to make any of it feel coherent. There had been tension for years, resentments from before my parents were even married, long memory stuff, territory stuff. The kind of emotional archaeology families do when they are too proud to admit they simply dislike what certain people make them feel. Eventually, it became no contact. And somehow, instead of stepping back and letting that be their issue, Victor and Renee started acting like my sister and I had become a diplomatic corridor they were entitled to use. If we saw our dad, they wanted details. If we didn't answer quickly enough, they acted wounded. If we declined an invitation, they responded with 3 alternate dates, like no had simply been a puzzle they could solve with better scheduling. My sister handled it better than I did at first. She is older, calmer, and less likely to confuse politeness with obligation. I, on the other hand, have a deeply annoying tendency to keep trying long after something has already turned unhealthy, because I want proof I gave it every possible chance. So when Renee reached out one spring and said she wanted to reconnect without all the old tension, I agreed to lunch. And I'll admit this. At first it seemed fine. She was warm. Funny even. She mostly avoided the obvious landmines. She asked about work, about my apartment, about a photography class I had just started taking for fun. For a few hours, it felt possible that maybe all of this could soften into something simpler. Maybe we could have the kind of relationship adults are always claiming is possible if everyone just chooses grace and maturity and not taking things personally. Then came December. Victor and Renee invited both of us to a family dinner. My sister and I hesitated because our father was still no contact with them, and we already knew anything family-themed involving those two came with emotional fine print. But eventually we went because we were tired of being cast as the difficult ones, and because, against our better judgment, we both still had this tiny hope that maybe things had actually improved. Dinner started tense and stayed tense in that soft-lit, civilized way that can be worse than open conflict. The worst moment came before anyone had even properly eaten. Victor offered to say grace. And in the middle of this long, loaded prayer about healing and unity and forgiveness, he said he hoped the younger members of the family would stop pulling things further apart. He never used our names. He did not need to. It landed exactly the way he intended, like a public correction disguised as spirituality. Like we had shown up for dinner and been handed responsibility for conflicts we did not start. I remember sitting there with my hands in my lap, trying to keep my face neutral, while my whole body filled with heat. My sister kicked my ankle lightly under the table, not because she was annoyed with me, but because she knew exactly what I was doing. I was shrinking, trying not to react, trying not to ruin the evening by acknowledging that the evening had already been ruined. After dinner, Renee kept chatting at us like nothing strange had happened. She asked if we wanted to do brunch after New Year's. Victor asked whether we'd thought any more about being the ones to help bring the family back together. That was the moment I started understanding something I had missed for too long. This was not reconciliation. This was recruitment. For the next few months, they became relentless. Dinner invitations, lunch invitations, quick catch-up coffee suggestions, texts about how they missed us, texts about how distance hurts more at their age because they understand now what family really means, texts with just enough guilt inside them that refusing started to feel like kicking a bruise. If we said no, they countered with another date. If we said we were busy, they asked when we would be free. If we did not answer quickly, they would call another relative and mention how worried they were that we seemed withdrawn. I cannot explain how maddening that became. Because when someone refuses to accept no as an actual answer, every polite response starts feeling like evidence for the prosecution. Too slow? You are cold. Too brief? You are upset. Too direct? You are cruel. There is no correct response when the other person has already decided access is their right. At the same time, something else complicated my judgment. I had gotten close to a coworker. His name was Theo. He was 27, thoughtful, funny, and easy to talk to in that dangerous way where you don't notice the intimacy building because it feels so low stakes at first. We both worked remotely, which meant long chats during the day, calls that stretched later than intended, and a rhythm of small check-ins that started to feel more emotionally significant than either of us was naming. The problem, obviously, was that he had a girlfriend. I did not know that at first. Not really. He never mentioned her. He messaged me constantly. He asked questions that felt just a little too personal. He FaceTimed me from the gym. He behaved like someone who wanted the intimacy of being chosen without any of the accountability that comes with openly choosing. Then one day, I called him after work, and he casually mentioned he was at his girlfriend's apartment. I felt like an idiot. Not because I had done anything explicit, because suddenly our whole connection had to be reinterpreted through a different moral light. I told him maybe we should talk less. He said it was fine. He said we were just friends, and maybe that should have been enough. Except after that, whenever I pulled back, he would double text. He would message me on another platform if I left him on read. He would notice if I watched his stories and hadn't answered. He behaved like someone who wanted emotional access without the honesty that should come with it. I'm bringing this up because it primed me to finally see what was happening with my aunt and uncle more clearly. Different kind of relationship. Same underlying problem. People asking for access they had not actually earned. People acting wounded when boundaries appeared. People wanting emotional closeness on terms that only worked for them. Once those two dynamics overlapped in my head, I started feeling insane with clarity. I was spending my life managing reactions. Victor and Renee's hurt. Theo's sulking if I pulled back. My father's irritation when their names came up. My sister's exhaustion. Everybody had feelings about my availability, my responsiveness, my warmth, my loyalty. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I had quietly stopped noticing how little room there was for my actual no. So, one Friday night, after yet another text from Renee asking if the next Thursday worked better for dinner instead, I sent the message I had apparently been writing in my head for months. I said that my sister and I appreciated the invitations, but we were not interested in doing regular meals or gatherings and would be keeping contact light for the foreseeable future. I said we wished them well, but needed them to respect that no further scheduling would be helpful. I read it 3 times before sending it because women are trained to believe every boundary must first survive a legal review for tone. Then I sent it. And for 12 full minutes, nothing happened. It was the most peaceful 12 minutes I had had in weeks. Then Victor called. I let it ring out. Then Renee texted. A long paragraph about how hurt she was, how unfair this felt, how they had only ever tried to love us and include us, and how devastated she was that we saw basic family effort as pressure. I did not answer. Then Theo messaged me, of all people, asking why I had gone so quiet lately and whether he had done something wrong. And I remember sitting there in my kitchen, staring at both conversations, and feeling something weirdly transformative happen in my chest. For once, I did not rush to manage anyone else's reaction. I just let them have it. That changed more than I expected. Victor and Renee escalated, obviously. They contacted another relative and said we were icing them out. They said they did not understand where all this hostility was coming from. They said grief had clearly affected us more deeply than anyone realized. That was a fun little twist. Watching boundaries get medically rebranded as emotional instability. Theo also got strange. He sent me a message saying he guessed he had misread the closeness between us and that he hoped I wasn't throwing away a really special connection because of labels. That line almost made me laugh. Because of labels? No, because of facts. Because your girlfriend existed whether or not you liked naming her. Because my discomfort did not become irrational just because you preferred the version of events where nothing wrong was happening. Update 1. My sister thanked me for sending the message because, in her words, she had been one awkward lunch away from either screaming or pretending to move to another country. That made me laugh hard enough to cry a little, which I think says something about how pent up all of this had become. Victor and Renee have mostly gone quiet now, though in a very performative way. Holiday texts, one birthday message. Nothing direct enough to start the whole cycle again, but just enough to preserve their self-image as people who are always trying. Theo stopped messaging once I said clearly that I was not interested in participating in any connection that required me to ignore the existence of his relationship. He sent one last paragraph about how I had made things bigger than they were. Again, a very popular sentence among people who benefit from blurred lines. Update 2. The strangest part of all this is that I do not feel triumphant. I feel quieter. I used to think boundaries would feel dramatic, like a speech, like slamming a door, like finally becoming the kind of woman who never doubts herself. Mostly boundaries feel like this: answering fewer messages, sleeping better, not having to rehearse explanations in the shower, and noticing how much of your personality starts to return when you are no longer spending half your life making yourself digestible for people who refuse to hear no. And I think the sentence I keep coming back to is this: people who respect you do not need 12 versions of your boundary before they decide it is real. That goes for family. That goes for coworkers. That goes for anyone who mistakes your kindness for open access. I am still sad sometimes. Family conflict is ugly even when you are right. And there is always a part of me that wishes things could have been softer, easier, more mutual. But softer was never actually what they were offering. What they were offering was continued access, as long as I kept paying for it with silence. And I'm done doing that.